Hi, welcome to Celebrating Culture. I'm coming to you from the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, Louisiana. It's actually one of the top 5 museums in the world, and it's been expanding tremendously in the most recent years. Behind me is a sculpture that was just added. It actually shows pilots getting ready to leave to fly over Sicily, and it was done by one of those pilots 64 years later after he finished the mission. Over 88,000 airmen died in World War II. In this episode, we're going to showcase General Chennault and the Flying Tigers and the importance of their mission in China. We're also going to take you on a ride of the PT boat. The PT boat and the landing craft for D-Day were built right here in New Orleans, Louisiana by Andrew Higgins. And another important ingredient to the success of World War II was morale. The music of that era was legendary. New Orleans' best ambassadors are the Victory Bells. The Victory Bells perform here in New Orleans, in America, and around the world, inspiring and thanking veterans for what they did. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Celebrating Culture is brought to you by AWE News. AWE News also produces New Orleans Insider Tours, which are 10 self-guided tours of New Orleans and Louisiana. To download the apps, all you have to do is point your phone at the flow code in the camera mode, and you're ready to really experience Louisiana. Hi, welcome back to Celebrating Culture. We're here today at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, Louisiana, with Dr. Robert Citino. Welcome to the show.
Charles, thanks for having me.
And now we're in the room here about the hump, and I see the P-40. So tell us about General Chennault and the China campaign.
So we have this magnificent flying tiger over my head. It's called that because of the painting on the engine cowling, those fierce-looking teeth. The Japanese are launching a vicious war of conquest into China in 1937, so we're talking 4 years before Pearl Harbor. And the Chinese are reeling back in some disarray, but China has friends in the United States, and one of them is a retired U.S. Army Air Corps by the name of Claire Chennault. He went and flew for the Chinese under contract. He and some of his retired friends, and he taught Chinese pilots how to handle some new modern equipment. He put together a kind of primitive early warning system. We're looking at high tech right now, 1938 style, right? But China was a country with a barely developed infrastructure. So kind of a complicated system of pennants and flags that would tell flyers when the Japanese were 30 minutes out, 15 minutes out, when it was time to scramble the planes, when it was time to get aloft. I've often thought that that's how you have to make war if you're high tech and you're campaigning in a low tech environment, man, you got to be clever. And Chennault had it. He came back to the States and sold Washington on this. He said, look, Japanese are our strategic adversary. China's our ally, and the Japanese are wreaking havoc over there. We have to do something about air power for the Chinese. And that turned into, from kind of an improvised effort on Chennault's part, to an officially sanctioned American Volunteer Group, AVG, but better known to everybody, of course, once again, as the Flying Tigers. They played a major role in China being able to survive the Japanese onslaught.
And the numbers I heard, I mean, were unbelievable kill ratio to planes they lost.
The Japanese have a very, very swift little fighter plane. We know it as the Zero. It's maneuverable, and it's fast, and it's light. But this Hulk above me could really dish out and accept a lot more punishment than the Zero could. And I think the Japanese soon found that what they had uncontested control of the air. Now suddenly they were fighting for every bit of airspace, and that was all the difference.
Now, I also heard that he had tactics. General Chennault, the wingman theory, you go up in pairs.
Everybody knows the wingman theory today. Matter of fact, you say it when you go out at night. You're going to be my wingman?
That's right.
You're going to take care of me. Most of our air tactics that we use still today were invented was the 1920s and 1930s.
We used to defend the hump as well, the cargo planes?
So you talked about the hump here. What the hump is getting over the Himalaya mountains. It's flying supplies from Burma, controlled by the Americans and the British, into China over the Himalayas. It's one of the most dangerous flights you could possibly imagine. There's a huge updraft, and that'll kill you. And then there's a huge downdraft, and that'll kill you if you're not a very skilled and very attentive pilot, and if your plane doesn't experience any kind of failure. P-40s would accompany those transport flights at least part of the way over the hump to make sure that they were not interfered with by Japanese aircraft. But let me just say this. Americans know D-Day, Americans know the Battle of the Bulge, Americans know Midway. There's certain iconic battles. The hump and the CBI, China, Burma, India theater, have never gotten the attention they deserve.
But John Wayne did make a movie.
John Wayne made a movie about it, and that might be good enough. I'm really proud that here at the museum, we have this entire rich, fulsome gallery dedicated to the CBI because hundreds of thousands of U.S. servicemen were there. I've met many of them, and they always say what I just said. Yeah, no one ever thinks about the CBI.
Also, General Chennault retired to Monroe, Louisiana, and they've put together a museum there as well.
A very fine museum.
I'm the CEO president of the Chennault Aviation Military Museum, and I'm the granddaughter of General Claire Lee Chennault. That's why they let me run the place. One of the things that I admire most about my grandfather is he never gave up. He believed in himself. and he did what he needed to do when he needed to do it. When he joined the military, he believed in fighter tactics, and because of that, he was able to go over and he was able to make a difference in China. And today, what he was able to do in China is an inspiration for what we need to be doing. He wrote a book in 1949 called Way of a Fighter, and the very last sentence of that book says, "It is my fondest hope that the sign of the flying tiger will remain aloft just as long as it is needed on both shores of the Pacific to show two great peoples working toward a common goal in war and peace." So this is something that is an inspiration that he did, and this is why we have the Chennault Aviation and Military Museum. We teach that story, but even more importantly, we tell the story of veterans and the people who served our country. Our museum is not about the wars, it is about people who served in the wars. We have over 11,000 artifacts on display, but also we have veteran services that are so important. We have PTSD clinics bi-monthly for combat veterans. We also have our own chapter of the Disabled American Veterans Association, who has been able to get hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of additional benefits for our local veterans. We're partnered with the Library of Congress in their Veterans Oral History programs to try to capture as many of the oral history of our soldiers and our veterans in their service for our country, but also our education programs. If we don't educate these kids that are coming up today and these students, we're not going to remain free. We're not going to have anybody that's going to take up the fight for freedom. So what we can do to show our kids and to use our soldiers and their stories and our veterans as an inspiration to inspire these children that our country is worth fighting for, our freedoms are worth fighting for, is one of the biggest missions that I feel like we have in this museum. I truly believe the Chinese looked up there and they saw these airplanes that were painted with a tiger shark's teeth. They revere the tiger very much in China, and they called it Feihu, flying tiger. And also it was propaganda against the Japanese because Japan is a very small island surrounded by sharks, and the Japanese are very superstitious and afraid of sharks. The museum building itself is in one of the last remaining buildings of the largest navigation school in the whole United States in World War II. We graduated 15,000 navigators from here. We actually supplied almost half the navigators that were in Europe and in Asia. So we had an extremely important contribution during World War II. Unfortunately, almost 1,500 of those didn't make it back, and their names are on a plaque down at our airport today. ULM is the ULM Warhawks, and the Warhawks, the mascot represents the P-40 Warhawk airplanes that were flown by the Flying Tigers that were under the command of General Chennault.
I'm Rob Brewer, one of the founders of Flying Tiger Brewery, located in historic downtown Monroe. We take our name obviously after the Flying Tigers of World War II, who flew the P-40 Sharkmouth planes just like the one pictured behind me. And General Chennault, who was the commander of the Flying Tigers, graduated from LSU, but he lived in Monroe following the war, and we've got a number of connections to him and the Flying Tigers throughout our state. We've got parks, golf courses, we've got the Chennault Aviation and Military Museum located in Monroe as well. We've got connections to General Chennault and the Flying Tigers, to ULM and to LSU. Our part is just to keep the legacy of the Flying Tigers alive and tell that story. We also do Warhawk. It's our scholarship beer. We give 5% of our gross sales to a student scholarship at ULM supporting the President's Scholarship Top Hawks. Their mascot is a warhawk bird, but he wears a pilot's uniform, and they have their own little P-40 golf cart that they drive around, and they do a number of branding and connections to the Flying Tigers as well. There's a lot out there, but a younger generation just doesn't know the story of what they've done. It's a great history and something that you can take pride in.
This exhibit is phenomenal, what you've done in bringing actually a P-40 Warhawk in.
Yeah.
And I'm proud to say the University of Monroe now honors the P-40 as their mascot.
What's the mascot? You have a hawk and a flight jacket.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. So just for the record for our audience, there is no such thing as a warhawk in nature, but there is a warhawk.
I was fooled for a few months there on that, I have to admit that.
That's good.
But I'm glad to see that a university took honoring veterans.
Yeah.
And in that effort, as their mascot, because then their students have to ask, well, who is this? Is this a bird?
Yeah,
And, they have to learn that.
I would urge all our viewers to get out to Monroe and to see the Chenault Museum, and while you're in beautiful Louisiana, don't miss the National World War II Museum here in New Orleans.
Rob, thank you for being on the
Once again,
show.
thank you.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Celebrating Culture. Our New Orleans Insider Tour app features a Statue, Stories, and Spirits tour. There are over 150 markers that all have a little story. Download our tour to make your stay in New Orleans extra special. Hi, welcome back to Celebrating Culture. We're here today at the PT-305, and I'm with Josh Schick, who's a curator of the World War II Museum. Josh, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much.
The PT-305, it's been back in the water for a few years and after a long restoration period.
Yeah, she was under restoration for about 10 years. Take her all the way apart, put her all the way back together, get her back into original running condition so we can bring people on board and share her experience.
Now, as a historian, you made sure that it was period perfect, it seems.
Yeah, that's very important to us. When we're doing a restoration project, we want to make sure that every nut and bolt goes back in the way and the form that it would have during the war. We had a wonderful set of blueprints from Higgins Industries to support us during this restoration, as well as expertise with the local industry guys and a wonderful volunteer restoration crew that got her back to as close to original condition as you can get 75 years later.
Tell us the history of this boat.
So after she was launched at Higgins, she was commissioned into the U.S. Navy in December of '43. The crew took possession of the vessel. She's commissioned into a squadron called Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 22, or RON 22, which is 12 boats, and they were deployed to the Mediterranean theater as a group. Their job out there was to attack German coastal shipping from PT bases. They would go out at nighttime and patrol the coast. Over the course of the war, PT-305 conducted about 77 patrols. That's patrols into an enemy-occupied area. They saw action in any number of those patrols, and she came away from the war with 3 confirmed kills. The way we have the PT boat painted up today is for our interpretation date. The vessel currently represents November 1944. So at that point, she's painted in this camouflage scheme, and she has 2 kills, so represented by 2 plaques proudly displayed, very similar to fighter aircraft.
And how fast will she go?
305 is capable of moving at over 41 knots. We do operate with the original engines using the original engine package.
Also armament, that's original as well?
The weapons are non-firing, but the layout and the content of the weapons package are original. So these things carry a very heavy punch. 4 torpedoes, 2 depth charges, 2 twin 50 caliber machine guns, 2 single 50 caliber machine guns, a 60 millimeter mortar, 2 single barrel 20 millimeter anti-aircraft cannons, and a single 40 millimeter Bofors.
You had to also not only make it like it was in the war days, but you also had to make it certified for passengers.
Things have changed a little bit since 1940. She wasn't necessarily a passenger vessel during the war. You know, she had a war-oriented mission. Today, she is an artifact, and she's carrying passengers on board. We want them to experience that, but safety is a concern for the people on board, as well as safety for the vessel itself.
So how many volunteers or captains of the boat?
We have about 4 or 5 captains of the vessel. You need to have a certain license to operate this vessel as a captain, 100-ton masters at least. And then the rest of the crew is actually comprised of the volunteer crew that restored the boat. So anytime you see someone working on the boat, they're always someone that has generally worked with the project before she was even back in the water. 2 of our captains currently are Dale Casey and George Benedetto. Dale's a little bit newer to the project, and he's been one of the better captains recently. And then George Benedetto goes back with our project way to the beginnings before we even got this vessel. So
we're here today at the Blue Crab Restaurant and the Marina of New Orleans, and I'm with George Benedetto. George, you're the guy I understand who rebuilt this boat.
Well, yeah, myself and a wonderful team of volunteers that came together to reconstruct the PT-305.
The D-Day Museum was the original concept. How did that get started?
That concept was started originally by Dr. Ambrose and Nick Mueller. They started the concept of the D-Day Museum in New Orleans because of the legacy of Andrew Higgins, who built all the landing craft for World War II. As Eisenhower pointed out, the significance of the landing craft that were built in New Orleans and the success in going into the beaches that it couldn't ordinarily have been crossed without the Higgins boats.
Now, Eisenhower actually had a statement he made about Higgins.
Eisenhower had a statement he made about Higgins. He said, Higgins is one of the men that helped win the war for us. Without those boats, we could have never crossed those beaches.
That's really New Orleans. Thousands of boats got produced, huh?
Higgins produced 20,000 of those boats. 30 boats a day came off the production line.
And actually, when you go in the World War II Museum, you see a Higgins boat that you can walk on. Is that one you restored?
Exactly. That's the very first boat that we did. Started that boat in 1993. That was a 3-year project.
Now you moved on to the PT boat.
Moved on to the PT boat, and what a great vessel she is. This was an overall 12-year restoration project. PT boat has 400 build sheets. So we had quite the challenge obtaining hardware, artifacts, and engines and so forth. But the community came together, the crew came together with the support of the community in the museum we were able to accomplish for over a 12-year period.
And then when did you guys put it back in the water?
We put it back in the water in March of 2017.
What is the use of the boat?
The use of the boat is part of the museum's outreach program because since it's a mobile vessel and it can go to different sites, it can help attract interest for the museum. And the turnout's been tremendous. In fact, as people come across the deck, our biggest challenge is to keep them moving because they want to sit there and look at it all day long.
I'm here today with Dale Casey. Dale, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Dale, tell me, how did you come to get involved with it?
When they started to decide to run the vessel with passengers on board, they needed to get with the Coast Guard. And when they needed to get with the Coast Guard, they needed a licensed captain, and they approached me, and I've had the honor to be that guy. Since then, we've brought on 3 other captains.
Do you take it to other places in your outreach? Where do you go?
Yes, we take it to other places. Like today, we're here at the Blue Crab. I've been to Madisonville, and just recently, I went to Bay St. Louis for the whole weekend.
You've given a lot of World War II veterans rides.
Yes.
What's that like?
The biggest honor I've ever done with this boat is meeting some of the World War II vets. I actually had the honor of meeting a torpedo man that was stationed on this boat. Brought tears to my eyes when he got choked up.
Well, Dale, I want to thank you for all you're doing to help honor veterans and give people the experience of what it was like during that period to appreciate them more. It's just wonderful.
It's an honor just to be part of it.
The PT also is in American history. I mean, we just have an affinity to it. It maybe starts with John F. Kennedy.
The PT is kind of fascinating in that it comes up in pop culture very often. It starts with they were expendable, getting Douglas MacArthur out of the Philippines. And there's McHale's Navy. Always gets people with McHale's Navy. And then you have John F. Kennedy's experience in the Pacific, where his boat is actually rammed by a Japanese destroyer. You know, Kennedy rises to prominence as President of the United States and everything, so people identify with that.
When somebody wants to ride the boat, how do they take a ride on the boat?
There's 2 options. They can come and see the boat for a deck tour, which are available, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sundays. And then on Saturdays, we offer rides on the vessels.
Welcome aboard.
You can book a ride through the World War II Museum. You come out to our boathouse. We're out here on Lake Pontchartrain. We're next to Lakefront Airport. And when we go out into the water, we actually kind of prowl some of the old areas that these boats went on after they came out of the Higgins factory.
Just did a great run, and I want to welcome Matt Selzer to the show.
Nice
Matt,
to meet you, Charles.
You won the boat. What did you think?
The greatest. Exhilarating. What a wonderful restoration of a real piece of history, an important part of our World War II victory.
What made you think about wanting to do this?
A really cool activity. We've been to the World War II Museum downtown and seen all the planes and some big signs, and like, hey, we got to do this. It's exciting.
If you come out here for boat riding, are there other things to do or places to eat?
There's a couple around here. This area is in revitalization, and then you've got the wonderful Lakefront Airport out there as well.
Is there a website people can go to?
You can go to the World War II Museum's website, nationalworldwar2museum.org, and you'll find a link to PT305, and you'll find all the information you need there.
Josh, I want to thank you for being on the show, and stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Celebrating Culture. Celebrating Culture is brought to you by AWE News. AWE News also produces New Orleans Insider Tours, which are 10 self-guided tours of New Orleans and Louisiana. To download the apps, all you have to do is point your phone at the flow code in the camera mode, and you're ready to really experience Louisiana.
In the mood, oh what a hot hit, be alive and get the job, you gotta learn how.
Welcome back to Celebrating Culture. I'm here today with Skyline Russo, who's one of the Victory Bells of New Orleans. And the Victory Bells of New Orleans are the best ambassadors New Orleans has. Skyline, welcome to the show.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. It's good to be here.
How long have you been a Victory Bell?
I am just hitting about 1.5 years now.
But you have been in this year.
I have been in this year.
All over.
Yeah, I've been thrown into it pretty quickly, and it was just a whirlwind, more than I can imagine.
So the highlights, obviously, Memorial Day and D-Day because of the World War II Museum.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what are the big shows that go on during those 2 days?
We do a lot of traveling during those days as well. We're everywhere. We'll go as far as Guam, Hawaii. Whoever wants us, we'll be there.
Normandy next year.
Normandy next year, yes. We have a cruise going to Normandy, and I think there'll be 6 Victory Bells floating aboard on the cruise.
I have a friend who actually said he's been asked to parachute out of a vintage plane on D-Day. He's a retired jumper.
Wow! And is he going to do it?
He's going to do it.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
So apparently they got the planes that we see at the air show are going to be part of this landing on D-Day. The recreation is going to be phenomenal.
That's crazy. These veterans can do anything, no matter how old they are. I'm telling you, if they can still jump out of the plane, they can do anything.
You guys interact with them so much.
Absolutely. It's like they're like our second great grandparents. I mean, they really make you feel like one of their own, and they tell you their stories, and we listen to them.
How are you? Can I take you over to the cancel?
She wants this way. Wait. Step aside. Step aside.
Wait, come here.
Good job.
I'm going to come back.
We work with the Gary Sinise Foundation to bring as many World War II veterans as we can to the museum because that museum is them. It's always great when they get to experience it, and to watch them experience it is unlike anything. I mean, they're just transported back to that time. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad.
When you're Victory Bell and you see a veteran come up to you and just connect with the music, what is it like?
Well, first of all, they usually come up with tears in their eyes just because they're reminded of that time. And the music of the 1940s just really brings them back to a happy place, because there was a lot of memories that weren't so happy during the 1940s, but they tell us all the time that music and entertainment is what helped them win the war. But also the families connect with it as well. They will say, my mom used to play that song on the piano all the time, and I just lost her, and my dad was a World War II vet, and he used to sing this song all the time.
And the
Just
Andrews
brings them joy.
Sisters, what a sound they had.
Yes, we love the Andrews Sisters. That's our favorite group. That's who we mold ourselves after.
And you have family that was in the military.
Yes, my uncle is a high-ranking officer in the military, and then my great-grandpa was also in World War II. He's not here anymore, but if he was here, I could ask him so many things, but I mean, I get a lot of answers from all the World War II veterans that we interact with today. And they just want somebody to listen to them. They want to feel appreciated, and we want to let them know that they are appreciated and that we're just as grateful for what they did in the 1940s today as they were then.
The air show, that's a great outdoor concert.
It was packed out, and we had great weather this year for the most part. It's very family friendly. You'll see anybody from little babies there to great grandparents walking with their great grandchildren, showing them the aircrafts that they might have been on.
You also do Veterans Day?
Our entire Veterans Week, actually, I think we had about 18 gigs altogether, all across from Phoenix, Texas, right here in New Orleans. We're in the Veterans Day Parade. We go everywhere. That's one of our favorite holidays.
Busiest time of the year, Veterans Day. One of my favorite memories was we visit a lot of VA hospitals and veterans homes. We'll just show up and go to all the units. But one time I was in an Alzheimer unit, and they said he doesn't even remember his name, and we started singing Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, and he sang every single word.
Yep. Really?
Every single word.
How touching
Every
it is.
single word, and it was just, I mean, this man doesn't remember his name, but he remembered all those words of that song, and just the smile on his face makes everything.
Knowing that we can do that for veterans and people that have Alzheimer's, knowing that we can bring them back to their conscience for just even a moment, we bring them right back to where they were that time. They can remember exactly where they were when they heard that
get
song.
So many. My wife's hair was done like that when I met her, or that's the song we danced to when we first met. It's just so magical. I didn't know that I was going to be touched by what I do so much. I was looking at it as a performer, but the first time I did a show and we sing our service salute, and a veteran who can barely stands up for his service song. I mean, the waterworks are uncontrollable.
Wow.
Yeah, me too. Same thing. I actually auditioned to be a singing server at the canteen, and I got asked to be a Victory Bell instead. And I was like, well, yeah, okay, sure, Victory Bell. I've only heard of them. I kind of know what they were, but like actually stepping into the shoes, it was very much like Christian, like especially when I first did the service salute, like, and being in front of these people that have fought for me to do this, it's very overwhelming.
Christmas is rolling around as your year ends.
Christmas is rolling around. We're actually at the Ritz-Carlton today singing some Christmas carols. We're getting ready for our Christmas show. We open December 1st. Almost every day in December, sometimes twice a day, we have Christmas shows. We'll have them in the evening as well as the daytime. You can get a meal, watch the bells perform, and sing some 1940s Christmas music.
And if somebody wants to find more?
You can go to the World War II Museum website or BB Stage Door Canteen, and you can check out our ticket prices, our times, days, whatever you want to find there.
Skylar, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
And listen, the voice is unbelievable. You really got to hear the Victory Bells. Thank you for all you guys are doing. We'll be right back with more of Celebrating Culture. Our New Orleans Insider Tour app features a Statue, Stories, and Spirits tour. There are over 150 markers that all have a little story. Download our tour to make your stay in New Orleans extra special. Hi, welcome back to Celebrating Culture. We're here today at the VA Hospital in New Orleans, Louisiana, at this monument to the World War I veterans, which is dedicated in recognition of the soldiers of World War I for their bravery and loyalty and sacrifices to a grateful nation, for patriotism, devotion, and duty and love of God and country. One of the important things we have on these days that are special to us, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, D-Day, is to honor those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. During his presidency, President Obama took great care to make sure that he honored those men. And one of his best speeches I'd like you to hear.
On April 25th, 1866, about a year after the Civil War ended, a group of women visited a cemetery in Columbus, Mississippi to place flowers by the graves of Confederate soldiers who had fallen at Shiloh. As they did, they noticed other graves nearby, belonging to Union dead. But no one had come to visit those graves or place a flower there. So they decided to lay a few stems for those men too, in recognition not of a fallen Confederate or a fallen Union soldier, but a fallen American. A few years later, an organization of Civil War veterans established what became Memorial Day, selecting a date that coincided with the time when flowers were in bloom. So this weekend, as we commemorate Memorial Day, I ask you to hold all our fallen heroes in your hearts. And if you can, lay a flower where they've come to rest.
President Obama, in a few short words, has inspired us to get involved, to show the appreciation we have for those that worked to give us our freedom and died over the years in the ultimate sacrifice. Look up Wreaths Across America, look up a cemetery for Memorial Day, take the time to hug a veteran, do something to show your appreciation. Thank you, and we'll be right back with more of Celebrating Culture. Hi, welcome back to Celebrating Culture. I hope you've enjoyed this episode on the World War II Museum, the Flying Tigers, the Victory Bells, and the PT-305. And I would encourage you to come out here to the marina by the New Orleans Lakefront Airport and take a ride on the PT-305 and see what it was like for those men in the 1940s as they fought for our freedom. And let's always remember to keep honoring and caring for those that have served to defend America.
Bob, 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 Bob. He was famed short that mouth Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else could play. He was a top man at his craft. But then his number came up and he was going for the draft. He's in the army now, a blowing reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy, Company B. They made him blow a bugle for his Uncle Sam. It really brought him down because he couldn't jam. The captain seemed to understand, because the next day the cap went out and drafted a band. And now the company jumps when he plays reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy, Company B.